From zero to hero, momentum makers, momentum creators. Let's go.
Okay, so thank you so much for being with me today. I wanted to give like a brief presentation of the company because today we're diving into the company that's literally changing the speed of light and or at least how we use it. So I'm joined by the co-founders of Lightium, Amir and Frederick, whose startup is building the future of photonic chips using thin film lithium niobate technology. They are not just playing with lasers for fun. Lightium is powering the next generation of data centers, AI, telecom, and even quantum computing with ultra-fast, energy-efficient photonic solutions. Fresh off a 7 million seed round and a major Swiss innovation grant, Amir and Frederick are here to share how they're scaling a cutting-edge foundry in the heart of Europe. So let's get into it. Thank you so much, Amir and Frederick, for being here with me today.
Thank you.
I am delighted to host you and to know more about the company. So let's start with Amir. Amir, you've spent 12 plus years immersed in photonics and micro nanotechnology. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, even that, but yeah, I whitened a few hairs in this field.
Okay. So what light that spark originally? Like, did you always know that you're kind of like a photonics guy, or was there a specific moment that pulled you into deep tech?
Ooh, that's a very interesting story. So I kind of sort of had an interesting story. So, I did my bachelor in the field of electrical engineering. Since sort of my high school, I was like also in physics or MPL, so I was very interested in physics. Kind of an interesting fact. I was first. In my first school career, I had nothing to do with photonics. I was working more at electrical engineering and instead complete circuit design, pure engineering, like nothing, physics, very abstract. And I kind of got tired of it. And then I kind of pursued for a few years my more physics, interest. So I went to actually interesting. I went and worked at CERN and LHC here in Zurich. So high energy physics, the other end of the spectrum. And that was kind of interesting. But ultimately, I had something like this. If you're working on a field that you cannot describe what you're doing to your grandmother, is maybe not the right fit to be. But high energy physics and sort of particle physics was fun for a time. But ultimately, this was it was a little bit like too physics. So it was too abstract. So I wanted to do something in between of engineering and physics. And at that time, then kind of my sort of let's say ship landed on the field of quantum optics. So I found this opportunity at the EPF field in Lausanne with Professor Tobias Kiepenberg, who was, it was a lot of physics, but also engineering. So that's what this really optics is. This of high end physics and still research, but also not so abstract like cosmology or high energy physics. So you can something that actually you can see under a microscope and show it to your grandmother. And so that's how I ended up in a field of photonic. So in between of engineering and physics, I was studying and actually kind of interesting for this. Even a startup, I was working during my PhD in the field of quantum optics. So making quantum computers in a simple word using optics and photonics. And that was the PhDs and roots and backgrounds of this technology we are developing goes back to that time. My own PhD study, but which we developed the science behind it, and step by step over the years we increase the maturity of this to an extent. Now it becomes a technology that people are willing to pay money to actually buy those type of chips. So kind of went from a basic science, but like we'll discuss it probably in the later stage. It's not that we sort of set out day one to make a startup 12 years ago or 13 years ago. It
Yeah.
actually kind of pushed into it.
Wow, that's really interesting. And Frederick, and you had a wild career, right, as well. Like, so you had a PhD in microsystems at EPFL, a research stint at Stanford, then key roles at Sensirion and CSEM, right? So how do you go from cutting edge academia to leading revenue at a photonic startup? Did you always have like the startup itch, or did something actually push you out of the lab and into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I don't think we, at least for myself, there is not a path that was predetermined, right? I think I was really into
It
into
never
it.
is, right?
It never is,
We
right?
think something and then
No,
everything changes.
exactly. It's just, opportunities and leaving doors open, right? And having the curiosity to open doors, right? I think it's very important for us as researcher, right? But yeah, for sure, at the beginning of my career, I was really heavily into the labs, right? And after 4 years at EPFL doing my PhD and 2 years at Stanford where I was, in basement with Windows-less labs, right? Doing experiments alone, practically speaking. I was really fed up with this, let's say, environment. I needed to speak to people, right? And that's how I started, after my research at Stanford, I went to a Swiss company more on the business side of it, really to get out of the labs, get out of the facilities and start, talking to people, right? And understanding their needs, understanding their problems. And that led me to this path, right? But it was not from the beginning set up.
Interesting turn of events. Me and Frederick were like studying around the same time at EPFL, but we didn't know each other. And actually, interesting turn of events. We both went to the US, but again, we didn't know. And then ultimately, we ended up working for the same company for nearly 5 years. A research center at Switzerland called CSC. And that's the first time we met, but then we kind of had the same sort of very close career steps.
We were stuck in different labs.
That's amazing. That's exactly what was my next question. Like, I wanted to connect the dots because we heard the story of Amir, we heard the story of Frederick. And so the connecting dot, let's say, between the two of you is the company called CSEM, right? So, Amir, you were leading there the photonics research and development at that time, right? And Frederick, what were you doing in the?
I was bringing customers in.
Okay, wow. So in sales, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. So CSEM is a applied research center, right? Where compared to a university where the mission is really to teach and research, at CSEM we had to create technologies that were useful for the industry, right? For the Swiss industry, but the overall industry at large. So for that, at the end you need to have customers. So my role was to identify markets and customers for the technologies that we were developing. And that's how we started working together with Amir, myself on the business side and Amir on the technology side.
Which is, by the way, what's actually we're still doing at Lightium. So
Yeah.
Frederick handles, everything which touches the business and customers and sales. I typically like handle all the technicals and executions and operational aspects of it. So
Wow. That should be really interesting, right?
Well, what is nice is that we could start working together, not daily, but very, frequently for like, 4 years, right? Before starting the company. So as co-founders, it's really important to get to know each other and know how to live together, how to interact together. And we could do that, before starting Lightium.
you have to go to a few dates before you marry someone
Yeah.
and have a kid. That's the same story. Yes, indeed.
But let's just take a little step back. So what did actually make you take the decision to co-found the company? Like, you were working at the company that you probably both liked, and you also liked each other, right? You say, hey, this guy is really cool, and probably the same from the other side. And so you became friends. And then what actually, like, was it some like remarkable moment? Was it something that you said, like you were sitting in a meeting maybe or talking to the customer and say, hey, maybe I should try it on my own? Like, do you remember something specific?
Very, very, very clearly. So, I mean, this sort of the startup that actually we sort of, it kind of an interesting story. It didn't, come just from having a good technology. Actually, born out of a kind of a frustration, right? And a market need. So what was the story is that, when I came to CSCM, I mean, they wanted to actually, started something, in the field of integrated photonics, sort of, I was kind of gallivanting in the US at that time. And then I kind of came to actually, build something. And then TFLN, of course, was an interesting technology, this sinter lithium library that we started working. And originally, we didn't have, very clear idea what to do with it. So we looked at it more from exactly the quantum computing, sort of research that I've been doing. And then we went to, a few conferences and started, presenting results. And then, people got interested and said, you fabricate this, can you do this little chip for me? And then one chip led to two led to four. And then we found ourselves actually doing a manufacturing, service for, people. And very interestingly, that actually to be very, very successful. And, especially a lot of thanks to the, business development team led by also Frederick. A lot of customers, find it interesting. And, while we were doing this stuff, outside of us, something happened in the world that made even further interesting. That's called ChatGPT. So ChatGPT happened in, what was it, like 2021? And then suddenly the demand for, high-speed interconnects and, data center infrastructure skyrocketed, like literally skyrocketed, right? And obviously at that time, we were doing this more from, again, the client security, and then like big customers are the people who you would never imagine that, you would interact with, like tier one transceiver companies and hyperscalers knock on our door and then say, oh, we're interested in what you're doing. Can you make this, so can we buy this chip from you? And it's surprising. We send a few chips and then people like it. Like a lot of people say, this meets our stakes, our consumption cost. Wait, can you give us now like 1 million of this? And we couldn't because, sort of CACM was, research institute. They had their own, fabrication facility, clean room, which is a nice, sort of clean room, but it's not a production facility. It's like more like an R&D facility. So beyond, prototyping and very small, size product, you cannot do that. And but we had customers who were desperately looking for like sort of this is what we want, but we need like 1 million of this, right? And for sometimes we sort of pursued that actually convinced the CSM management to actually expand our facilities to actually accommodate this need. Is kind of a golden goose, but that didn't fly very well. I would say, let's say, probably doesn't match with the business model of CSM, which is still a research center, not a production facility. And me and Frederick, kind of were at forefront of it. So we see very like hands-on, first-hand demands and the sort of the hunger for this technology from the customer side. And on the other hand, we were kind of frustrated because we couldn't scale it. And at that time, I was incredibly like sort of down in a sense that this was a life of opportunity, and we have to let it go for other customers to take it up. Like bring it from science to something now people are willing to pay for it, and we cannot valorize it now anymore. I was very, very depressed at the time, and then kind of didn't know what to do. It kind of raised the capacity of how we can grow within just the research institute, right? And Frederick came like literally one day. We just went to for a walk, and then he planted this idea. Say, why don't we just quit and pursue it ourselves? And that was great. I said like, no, you're joking. I know he was very persistent, and I remember like sort of my home is in a little bit outside of Zurich, so it came all the way to my home. I was taking a few days off to sort of cool down, and yeah, and he kind of pursued me, said like, let's do it. And we had actually a third co-founder, Professor Dirk Engelmann from MIT, who also was very encouraged. Said, guys, go ahead, I will support you as well. And then a few good things also like sort of happened at the same time. I admit we were very also lucky being at the right time at the right moment, and then hitting a few right people, and the stars. So in that sense, aligned. And we kind of, when I came back, I think I remember it was 2nd of August, I handed over my resignation. By the end of August, we were out of the old company, and we registered Lightium 14
Wow.
days later. So
Wow,
so kind of
that's
we decided
very
that
fast.
we're thinking it, let's just jump in sort of cold water and then see where it goes.
You have already maybe like clear ideas in your mind, so maybe it helped. But also, Frederick, tell me the truth, you had to sell this idea to Amir a little bit, right? So he was just another customer in your eyes, and you were pitching your idea to him. And yeah, as we can see, it worked, right? I'm curious about the competition at that time, because yeah, this is the industry that uh, had skyrocketed like a couple of years ago, but it's still running very fast. So companies are continuing growing and continue to open up with new ideas, all new elements, new technologies to improve all the processes, to cut the cost, to cut the electric consumption. So how did you feel at, let's say, when you founded this startup, and how are you feeling today? towards the competition?
I think, in terms of competition, the luck we have is that this material, thin film lithium niobate, is pretty challenging to control and to process, right, as a material. And we were lucky, as Amir mentioned, that we were, pursuing or looking at this material from a science perspective, not really looking at it from a purely industrial needs. Because before ChatGPT, the speed and the efficiency that this material could, provide wasn't needed, right? Current state of the art was enough.
But
Um,
in the future.
yeah, exactly. So nobody else from the industry was looking at this material, and there was just a few other academic labs around the world that were, as us, right, looking at this material from a science perspective. And because of ChatGPT happened so fast, suddenly a lot of companies were like, oh, we need to find an alternative, right? And not a lot of people were looking at this material for a couple of years already. So in terms of direct competition, we have some great competitions, right? But we don't have 20 labs or 20 companies, just because before ChatGPT it was not needed.
Yeah, sure. Of course. It's crazy how fast everything is going. But also, you guys, you call Lightium a company that's driving a photonic revolution. So, but let's face it, like most people have no clue what that means. So what is the biggest, let's say, misconception or like silly question that you get about photonic chips or the photonics industry in general? So like, I don't know, what do people not understand about the space that they really should?
Okay, so maybe I just sort of mention that, obviously, electronic and digital, world is, I mean, it's shape of modern world, right? So everybody is familiar, like your consumer electronics, your laptops, your cell phones. I mean, like, this, sort of cell phone is known as a, how do you call it, in like, sort of electronic device. So yeah, this thing is a sort of work in an electronic device. But actually, always my example is that, this LCD, okay, that is a photonic device, right? Your face protection to open, that's another photonic device, right? Your camera is another photonic. Flash is another photonic device, an LED, right? You almost don't interact with anything electronic directly, right? You either interact with a camera or a laser or a sort of. So actually, photonic is a lot more around us because as humans, visual thing is very important, right? I mean, we interact with photons and we have to see and touch. So it's photonic is more around us than people think, but we are just not self-aware of it. However, when we are talking about photonic, we don't mean LCDs and sort of cameras and things. That's not an example of photonic. We typically mean integrated photonic. What does it mean? I mean, so analogy is that if you go like 40, 50 years ago, if people are old enough, they might remember like old radios that you have discrete components, like coils and capacitors and transistors. You put them together, become a shoebox size that was radio. Now, today is ridiculous. You just have it on a like a tip of your finger in a tiny chip, right? But optical systems, in a sense, they're currently where, like this electronic system were like 30, 40 years ago. Like, I mean, in California, you see the self-driving, cars that, you guys recently actually took. You would see on the roof of it, there's like a something with like a rotating, sort of mirrors, and then it becomes also a shoebox size. Like that's the thing. You want to have a LiDAR system for autonomous driving. It becomes a shoebox size with like rotating mechanical object, right? And then now people want take that in the same way they put a radio on a tiny chip, they put that also on a tiny chip that actually acts like that discrete system without. And the applications of this is enormous, right? I mean, everything from sensing, like biomedical sensings, to ranging, like LiDARs for autonomous drivings, to actually aerospace, and to quantum computing and novel forms of computing. But typically, at the moment, photons can do something that are really, really known for is they can travel in optical fibers with very little amount of loss and very, very high data rates that, we don't have anything electronics. I mean, actually, photonic system for, like data like communications, telecommunication has been around since 80s, right? Almost the entire backbone of, or if we call or send an email, go to internet, this very conversation we have right now is enabled by optical fiber networks, right? So you have optical fibers that actually can connect cities and countries. But then you have a little elements at the end of that optical fiber that sends bit with like 0, 1 by turning on and off the laser. And the first systems was like the old radios was the discrete components put together a shoebox like. Now people are trying to again bring that also fully on a chip. And that is exactly the type of chips we are making. So that's, I would say, the biggest applications of this, sort of technology. So you can actually argue like what photons are used for. I mean, they are not there to completely replace electronics. Like photons are not typically a very good medium for computing. They are big. They are not really small. You're limited with wavelengths in the line. They are power consuming. So for computations, and people argue that if it's useful or not, but definitely for transport of data, they are probably the best thing that we have currently, right? They travel with the speed of light. They have very little amount of losses, which means they can travel hundreds and thousands of kilometers without losing the information. And they can actually, have very high data rates, right? These three combinations that actually makes probably 99.99% of the data carried today, optical fibers. And now this optics is going to inside the data centers, right? So before it was for long distance, so between the cities. Inside the data centers, people were using Ethernet copper cables. But as the internet traffic is growing exponentially, like internet copper cables cannot cope with this demand. So people are putting now optics within the data center. And then suddenly when you go inside the data center, the volumes and number of links that you have would be just, like 100x more. And that's exactly the type of space that we are operating. We operate both in long distance, but also now the biggest market is data center, which is very pushed by AI. We are consuming data in a very exponential and crazy matter on a species in the range of 100x per decade. Right. So every decade, the amount of traffic and data we are consuming is 100x more. And that data needs to be stored, needs to be processed, and needs to be transported like mountains of data, right? And this is, I would say this is the new oil of this century, right? Data. So what companies are in the business of either storing, processing, or transport of data, I think they're going to have very good business to come. And that's what.
Also, because if we think about electric cars, right, we don't need fuel for those anymore. We don't need oil. So basically, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Yeah.
I mean, EVs for sure is important, but I mean, sort of where photonic would meet car industry is more when we are talking about like autonomous driving, like self-driving cars, right? So with camera, you can do so much. Like cameras give you a picture, but typically not the distance, right? So you don't have any idea of how far in meters the car. But LiDAR is like a 2D camera, like it just gives you a 2D image, but also the information on distance. And people can do that with discrete components, but they become big, bulky, heavy, and expensive. But if you put it in a chip, you can actually now have it in hundreds of millions, put it in every car. So in order for we have to be fully, sort of, let's say driveless, right, driverless, we really need to have the, sort of LiDAR system. And very important that LiDAR systems need to be compact and cheap. And that's what, semiconductor industry promise. So that is, one of the important applications to come beside the transport.
And Frederick, you and Amir are the classic tech and business founding duo, let's say. So how do you two divide and conquer as co-founders? Do you each stick to your lane? So one in the lab, one with customers, or is there a lot of crossover and tag teaming? So like any habits or rituals you use to stay aligned and in sync as a team?
Yeah, I think it's, I really like the interaction we have because it's at the same, it's very complementary, right? Both in terms of hard skills and soft skills. So in that sense, it's quite clear for us, right, who takes care of what, who is responsible of what. But at the same time, right, we are both of us are first-time founders, right? So we are making a lot of mistakes, and we are aware of that, right?
Which is normal.
It,
Everybody does.
course, right? It's very normal. So we rely a lot of on each other, right? I wouldn't dare starting knowing what I know now. I wouldn't dare starting a company alone. And I have the utmost respect for single founders. But for us, having this complementary means that on one hand we are very clear on who's good at one thing, who is good at the other thing. So it's we don't step on each other's toes, but at the same time we have supported each other very well, and so far it's been working very good.
I want to add something is that, like a startup world is really draining in the sense that it's intense. It's like running a marathon with as fast as you can and, reading a book, eating a Chinese food and giving birth at the same time. Like all of this sort of, that's how it is. But, and, mental pressure of running a startup, if you're doing it, like I would say, like it's something that actually people care and you have to run, it's intense. So emotional and the roller coaster that you go through. And again, I fully agree with Frederick. Like sort of Frederick is that I have utmost respect with single founder. I don't know how they're doing it, but if Frederick was not there, with a million times we could not build this stuff. Because at least for me, I mean, sometimes it's just the intensity. I mean, sometimes things are good, sometimes things are bad. And sometimes I'm down, ready to pick me up, and sometimes Frederick is down. So having, sort of somebody to go through this experience is not just also for support, but also, you know, I always, have this, how do you call it? I was following this series called How Do You Met Your Mother, and one of the nothing is in life is truly legendary unless you have a few close friends who, experiences with you. So in that sense, is like, having somebody else, it just makes it all different. Like you have one person to celebrate the joys and one person to actually like have a shoulder to cry on. Really having a co-founder is like, we always like this. So we are like parents, and this is a common thing. Being a single sort of founder is like being a single parent. It's incredibly
Yeah.
difficult.
You have second pair of hands, right? So it feels really like it's helping. And you can also have all the time a second opinion because sometimes we see a world with our own eyes and we think everybody else is seeing it the same way. But actually, it's actually good to hear somebody else's opinion and maybe change your mind as well.
And it's really important because, sort of, there's a lot of like decisions come to us. And honestly, we have a little bit of separation of things. So, when it comes to customer sales and the marketing, Frederick is incredibly actually talented, is much better than me. So he's like a king of pitching. More like when it comes to technical execution and other things. But we also do a little, so I do a lot of like customer thing, and Frederick also do. It's not like really like a really hard boundary. And that's very healthy because just like 3 weeks ago, I think I was incredibly sick, like so sick I could not get out of but company didn't go into it.
It needs to run anyway, yeah.
Was there to jump in, and when he was like traveling, could actually sort of and having this is incredibly. I'm kind of personally, feel blessed. I think like as a company is very important.
That's very nice. And Amir, what is the secret to build to like a strong team culture in a deep tech startup like Lightium? Like I know that Frederick, I heard he's calling himself Chief Pastry Officer. So clearly you guys like to keep it fun, I imagine. So how do you keep the culture like innovative and energetic while everyone's tackling these hardcore photonics challenges?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting. Early days we were discussing, about like in a startup, how to build it. Half of our discussion was all about like sort of like one of the cool things that actually what can we do with so what I would say like there are a lot of things that are seems details, but those were the ones that actually like sort of motivated us more than actually often technicals and sales and the numbers, right? How to build like
Mm-hmm.
how to build a team and what in provisions. Honestly, I have to say, like, the true answer to this is that we still don't know what we're doing. We do it, we talk to people, we're champions. But one of the things that actually, look, I always wanted to be in this like sort of fund company. Like everything that I was doing, say, oh, can I make it in a startup? So I always wanted to do it, but I'm incredibly actually again glad that I didn't make it in a startup right out of my PhD, like fresh out of PhD, right? Before getting to this, both of us, I mean, Frederick longer than me, but at least me, we worked with a sort of a corporate in a corporate world, right? And in my opinion, that was incredibly, sort of with all the negative, sort of experiences we had, was overall a very positive thing because that gave us this, point of reference, right? The sort of when we come out, a lot of discussions like, sort of how can we get the best was at the CSCM and the things that we didn't like, how do we change it, right? So I think you would be surprised how much we talk about these little things. Having a prior experience, I think, was very useful. I mean, there are a few things again, Frederick can comment more, but for us is incredibly important that actually our team doesn't feel that actually they are working for somebody else, right? So we have very, very extensive stock option programs. So every single person in the company, have a piece of the company, right? So we wanted them to feel that they are not working for somebody else. It's their company, right? So they care about it like it's their baby, right? And our motto that we thought about it is that, or let's say slogan for hiring is that one team, one goal, one team, many individuals. So we have a moonshot goal. We want to be in the moon by the end of the decade. So we have a moonshot project, which is incredibly difficult and ambitious, but it is realistic. We have one team, so it's like we support each other, but also we want to celebrate the individualities. And to build this team for us was really important that actually our team feel like a family together. So, for example, we have a lot of activities. That was really important for me to have a lot of team building activities. Every 2 weeks we have a Wednesday pizzas, which we have. We
Right.
put our meetings, where we have enough technical meetings, but at noon every second Wednesday we sort of order pizza and we discuss everything which is not technical, right? Company update, financial, whatever is but not technical, right? Every month we have a 2 hour. We go for an indoor sort of team building activity like bowling alley, laser tag, stuff like that. And once a quarter, a half a day hiking. Quarter in winter we went to Sledge. Obviously, we try to also like sort of show our employees the wonders of Switzerland, which is amazing. So hiking, things like that. We try to be a kind of an active company in the sense that we enjoy the ride together, but we still are, trying to actually build and learn how to ways to further motivate and, things that, it's a learning curve. I don't know if you want to add something about like team culture building.
I know. I think as you said, it's a work in progress. But for us, from day one, it was important to highlight the ownership and accountability that goes with it, right? So having a stock option plan for everybody in the company was extremely important for us to really align our long-term goals, but also sharing the success of the company.
Yeah, of course. I feel like you're almost talking about a family-owned company, like the way you treat your employees and the way you make it like fun and the way you make them feel involved in the growth process. Because if you're just an employee and you get like a monthly salary, you say, okay, I'll do whatever is required and I will not do the step forward. Meanwhile, if you feel the company is actually yours, because of course, as a stock owner, you would probably feel yourself more involved into making everything possible to make the company grow and as fast as possible, considering the environment you're working on. So yeah, that's very motivating.
And for motivation, but also I believe this is right. Like, at the end of this story, if people make hard work, they should get a reward of it, right? So in my opinion, like everybody is just, owns a piece of company, right? Even myself and Frederick, we are not, 100% share. Like shareholder, partial shareholders, like our employees, they also have our partial shareholders. Either we're going to succeed together or we don't succeed together. But whatever case, we do it together, right? That's
And Frederick, you have pitched Lightium to both customers and investors, so including also the closing of the seed round of 7 million Swiss francs. So huge compliments for that. So in your opinion, which is tougher, selling a cutting edge photonic solution to a skeptical customer or convincing a VC to bet on a deep tech startup?
That's interesting. I would say the toughest for the moment it's the investor, because the customers, we are lucky enough that they are finding us on their own, right? So we don't have to convince them that much, right? They are already convinced when they come to us. What we need to convince them about is how mature our platform is, how de-risked it is from the production capabilities, right? But from the solution itself, they come to us, right? So it's mainly about aligning our expectations. That's really difficult with customers, of course, and then convincing investors. It's more how to pitch the story to align what our customers is, what is needed from the market, and make sure that they understand the impact we could have, right? That's
and the future of the company as well, right? So where the company is going.
Yeah. So it's really about, bringing them on board towards our vision, the potential of the company. Rather with customers, the reality they're facing is there, right? So they need chips now. So it's easier to convince them.
And Amir, fast forward 5 or 10 years. If Lightium achieves its wildest ambitions, how the world would be different?
Data centers. I mean, look, I would say that in sort of what we are like what we are doing as center of what we are doing is we're interconnected, right? I mean, right now with this fast pace of AI, it's really hard to say what is going to happen in like the next 6 months like that because
Unpredictable. The world nowadays unpredictable, especially also due to changes of governments, and yeah, a lot of things are going on.
I strongly believe that there are two things that are going to happen. First of all, the data consumption is not going to slow down. A lot of people say like the amount of stuff that we are doing in machine learning and AI is a hype, which probably true. But data is not just related to AI. Data is also related to other high demand, data demand. And VR now we have this Apple VR thingy. So this is going to just increase, right? So more and more data intensive process. So we're going to be more and more digitally interconnected and consume more data, more sensors, and now autonomous driving is coming. So I strongly believe that actually our data consumption is going to remain like an exponential for at least the next decade. It's probably going to continue it too. And that is actually sort of an opportunity and also a challenge. An opportunity is that is going to enable things that are even, or widest mind cannot imagine. Like who would have thought that actually ChatGPT can do what it can do today 10 years ago, right? And imagine what another 10 years can do. It's not, we can't even conceive it, right? Which is a, good thing. The dark side of this is actually, when it comes to the energy effect on the climate, which is really important for me. And I was just searching the other day is that the carbon footprint, like these images that people it was becoming a trend a few days ago, right? I was searching like an amount of water that that consumes like tens of liters of water for each of those images, or the amount of carbon. And that is a dark side of AI is that training these large language models come with a penalty. It's not free, right? And as we are exponentially doing, is going to hurt our planet. Right now, if data centers were a country, they would have been the fifth biggest consumer of electricity, right? By 2030, data centers would consume more than Germany, UK, and France combined. And it's going to continue to grow, right? And of course, this energy, there's many aspects to it, and it's a complex process, but part is in processing, part is in storage, part is in transport. The good part, again, is it cooling. And so transport of data is, takes a lot of energy. And that's exactly what we are trying to battle. Like, I'm not claiming there's something unrealistic that Lightium is going to come and change the world, but I would be very, very proud that if we contribute that actually we reduce that energy even by 1%, right? Multiply by the number of transceiver we have in the data centers, the impact of it is very significant. And hopefully there are other scientists battling this 1%. And the way I would see it is that if we stack enough of number of little baby steps, together we might actually sort of put a leash on this climate change. And that is, I would say, like the impact that I would like to see is like we contribute that on one end, we don't be forced to actually abandon this digital transition, but we actually continue using this, AIs and high data rates, but with less, damaging to our, climate and our environment. Like even if we can actually save 1% energy in data centers, that is, that's a legacy of my lifetime. I would be incredibly proud because if you translate it to actually carbon, that's like billions of carbons, and you can actually calculate how many car equivalent of cars you get out of the street, right? So that is what we're battling. We're trying to actually, keep this demand for data while reducing the negative side of it. And I want to be realistic here. Again, I'm not saying that, sort of Lithium alone is going to change the world and solve the climate change single-handedly. That's just lunatics, right? We just sort of fighting for percentages, right?
Yes, contributing. That's good because if you think it this way and there are other 10 companies, 100, 1,000 companies thinking the same way, you're all contributing and the change can actually be real at that point.
Exactly. That's exactly it. This climate aspect is it's a very complex process. Like the people who are trying to simplify it, oh, we just go all of us go vegetarian. We have no, like that's not how the world works, right? But if technology works and if right number of people solve right number of problems together, we might have a sort of fighting chance. And I believe like transport of data is a major part of for sort of power consumption and the digital world. You cannot expect that, oh well, we just put a stop on AI and all of this. Of course, you cannot like sort of stop the innovations. We just have to fight with technology, the negative aspects of technology. That's I think what we are kind of doing.
And Amir, Frederick, we are heading to the end of the episode, and there is one question that we always ask to our guests, which is what gives you momentum? So I would like to ask this question to both of you. So just to understand what actually motivates you, let's say on a daily basis, and considering your view for the future of the company.
Yeah, I can start. For me, the momentum we have is building something together, right? That's, as we discussed, it's the first time that we are creating something from scratch, and I'm getting a lot of excitement just by looking at what we can achieve, in just a few weeks, right? That's, for me, that's the main difference between the startup world and the big corporation worlds, right? In a few weeks, we can change dramatically, and we can create things extremely rapidly. And seeing it being the witness and the being an actor, right, into this really excites me a lot.
I should disagree. I mean, the sort of the one of the arguments that when we're discussing with Fairrock company and leaving your sort of well-paid corporate safe jobs was that if you come back here when you're like in sort of in the 80s or 60s and come back, we are never gonna regret not quitting this. Yeah, if there's one thing we're gonna regret is like, oh, why we didn't take that risk, right? Nobody, I don't think, in the history of humankind regret not taking a risk, right? Regret taking a certain risk is always regret not taking that risk, right? And honestly, like a startup is for me is it's sort of like sort of raising a baby. It's incredibly intense. Like it's soul crushing, bone cracking, intense. So it's not an easy job. Incredibly intense. You really, I think, in my opinion, the most success trait in a startup is not neither the smartness nor network nor ability to sell, is just resilience, right? So you can tolerate and keep on living when other people would fail, right? So it's very incredibly intense, but also very rewarding. It's like a baby. It's very difficult to raise a baby, but their smile is, sort of light up your world. That's the same thing. Is that for me? Is it gives the same feeling? Is the fact that actually this we are now started with a baby. When we started the startup, it was like literally like a newborn. You have to feed all the time. Now when it started grew arm and leg and it will crawl, it still is a baby, but you can see it's growing and it started becoming independent. There are corners of the company I don't know what's going on in it anymore, which is actually quite interesting. And I feel like this is the most sort of richest experience of my entire life in terms of depths. And with all the intensity, I would do it a million times over. And yeah, if anybody is listening to your podcast and they're doubting shall they do it or not, they would regret not doing it. Not even if they fail, it's you should do it. You should take the risk
We
and
still learn something, right? Even when we fail. I feel like, especially in the American culture, the failure is part of the process. It's not the end of the world. It's not end of your life. It's not even end of your career, right? It's just part of it. So we need to embrace it and say, hey, thank you because I failed. I learned. Next time I will do something different.
I mean, if you're not failing, you're probably what you're doing is neither interesting or it's probably either not interesting or not, very high end. When you're failing a lot, but I mean, you can actually just come back is you're probably doing something right, right? And failing is part of the thing. I mean, if you're like should not be afraid of failing, but I'm just trying to say it's a very blissful experience in the sense that it's incredibly joyful. It's like being a parent, very challenging, but also very rewarding and blissful.
That's true. Amir, Frederick, thank you so much for this episode, for this small talk that we had today. I discovered so many new things, and you made me feel like I was in the company. So thank you for the warm conversation I had with you. I really feel like your company is very, let's say, have very familiar touch, right? So you really treat your employees with warmth and with fun, let's say, which is not so obvious for a lot of companies nowadays. So I wish you really best of luck, all the successes of the world, which for sure you will achieve. I would like to stay in touch with you if that's okay. So maybe we can catch up, I don't know, in a couple of months or maybe in 1 year, whenever you prepare to maybe to share again the new achievements of the company or to share with us your next successes. Thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. With pleasure.
Thank you.